All right, everybody, pay attention. I've just uploaded this as another piece of homework / test prep for you. And as always, I want you to enter this code and get it to run. And if you can't, let me know, but it works, right? So just copy it carefully. Pay attention to every line. So you see here we have a class called grocery item. And there we have our constructor, and we talked about constructors the other day in class. So a constructor is always public, and it's named the same as the name of the class, and it constructs an instance of the class. And here we have a toArg constructor, right? So we're passing in two arguments. So the way this works now is here's our application manager, because we always said that in addition to the classes we need to make our business logic and our application work, we want to have another class, which is the manager, right? It's the one who's driving everybody. It's getting it to work. So here's your driver class. And that's constructing an object of grocery list. And if you've got Eclipse up and going, run this in the debugger. So there we have a G, like a letter G, which is our reference, object reference to our grocery list. And we're calling the method new grocery list, so that's the constructor. And now we're calling the method make the list, right? So that means if we go to our grocery list, we should see a method called make the list. There it is. And the way this works now, this is a linked list. So the way a linked list works is you see here, I have a class called grocery list, and I'm making some grocery items, because that's what we put in a grocery list usually. And over here we have grocery item. Now here's the thing that makes it to be a linked list. Pay careful attention. You can watch the video a couple of times if you need to. Within our grocery item class, we have a data field, right? Because classes can contain methods and data. So we have a data attribute which is actually called grocery item, right? So we have a class called grocery item, and within that class we have a data attribute called grocery item. So we're embedding inside the grocery item a data field which is of its own type, and that makes it to be a linked list. And linked lists are one of the most powerful and useful data structures here in computer science, because we can construct, as you're seeing here, and you're going to understand this when you run the code yourself. But if you go over here, see, we're making a grocery item called fruit, and a grocery item called bread, and a grocery item called veggies. And each of those grocery items has a cost, and it has a name, and it also has a link to the next grocery item down chain. So here we're making a couple of placeholder data fields called next item and current item. And then we're making a method called make the list, meaning making our grocery list. So we're making an object called fruit, and we're saying new grocery item, and that's $3, and F just is what you put when you have a float type of numeric variable. F just means float. You can have decimals. And the name there is fruit. So cost is $3 and name is fruit. And similarly there for veggies and bread. And now this is what makes the linked list. So we have fruit.nextItem equals veggies, and veggies are veggies, and the next item is bread, and then we make something called fruit. Anyway, that's how we build up. So we have 1, 2, 3. We have 3 items in our grocery list. And linked lists, the way they work is you get a handle on your current object, and this will be very clear if you go through it in the debugger. You get a handle on your current object, and that object points to the next object down chain. That's a linked list. And what we're doing in this case is writing some code, and we're saying calculate the cost. So we're initializing a variable called total cost. We're saying it's 0. And remember, on last day we talked about arrays. So we're making an array called costs, which can have up to 10 slots. And now we're using a while loop. And the way our while loop is going here is we're saying, you see, so there's our array index controller. So our 0th element of our array is the current item dot item grocery cost. And that plus plus means post increment. So after you touch that variable, it bangs up 1. And then we're saying, well, we're also we're incrementing our total cost variable because that's what we're returning at the end. And then we're saying next item equals the current item's next item value, and the current item becomes the next item. So that's the little engine that makes our loop work. Once again, if you haven't dealt with data structures before, you're going to start dealing with them now. So you just need to jump in and either in the TextPad or in Eclipse, if you have Eclipse or some IDE, just enter this code and run it over there. And I'll step through this code myself in a debugger to give you a sense of it. So here's the code. And application manager, that's our main class. And of course, that has to be contained in a file called application manager. And there's our public static void main. And we're making our grocery list, G. So let's start debugging it right there. And let's step through this in the debugger and see what happens. So I'm going to go to Window, Perspective, Open Perspective, Debug. And when I do that, I get all of the stuff we saw on Saturday, such as the breakpoints and so on. So I'm going to go over here and say Start Debugging. Debug is a Java application. And now it's going to run, and it drops out at our first debug point, which is right there. So I'm going to clear away the stuff I had before. And I'm going to drop a watch on my G. So that's my object reference to a new grocery list. So we'll say watch. And currently it says error because we haven't executed line 4 yet. So we're going to go here and step over. And now we're on line 5. You see that little arrow right there pointing on line 5. And we see that 4... we talked about that the other day. That is a object reference, and ID equals 24. That's just something assigned by the Java runtime, but it's just letting us know that it's an object reference. And if we click that little arrow, we see all the data attributes held onto by that object reference, and they're all null because we haven't set anything yet. So, see, those are all the data fields of the class grocery list. Now let's say step over. Now what's going to happen here, we're saying system.out.println total cost of the groceries is, and we need to say step in now, because now we're going to go and execute that method called calculate the total cost, to calculate the cost, so it's going to jump down to line 38. If you say step over, it'll step over this method and return the value, but you want to step in at this point. So we'll say step in. So there's step into. Oh, now I went into the source code. See, I went into building a string, so I don't want that, so I'll say step out. So step return. And now I'm back here, so I'm going to say step into again because I want to get to that method. Another thing I could do is put see, I already have a debug point right there at line 42. So I could just say continue, and that'll jump me all the way ahead to my next debug point. So let's do that. So we'll say resume, and there we are at line 42. So let's see what our costs array looks like. So we'll say add expression costs. And there we have a reference which is returned by the Java runtime. And we see we have 10 empty slots, and there's 0 right now. And we have our array index, which is also 0 because that's what we initialized it to. And let's say step into. And now I'm in this while loop. So now I'm going to walk over my linked list, meaning I'm going to say current item, which is the first item in my linked list. What is it? Well, you want to see it. Let's go and look. So we'll say watch, and there is current item, and current item is fruit, and it costs $3. And the next item after fruit is veggies. So do you see how a linked list works? Embedded within each object is a pointer to the next object downstream. And this is the most powerful data structure there is in any programming language. All the other data structures you might have heard about, queue, stack, array, they're all built up under the covers using linked lists. And the last one now has a next item value of null, which will be important in a minute. So let's say step into, and now we're walking over our array. So there's our cost array. We're keeping track of the cost. Let's go and look at it. And you see the 0th element has now been set to 3. And now what about total cost? I don't think we've dropped a watch on that yet. So there's total cost still 0. So say step into. And now total cost is 3. And keep saying step into. And now we're back at the start of our while loop. So it's going to say is current item dot next item not equal to null. Because when this gets to null, then we're going to jump out of here. We're going to bail out. But as long as there is a next item, we're going to keep going. And current item dot next item has a value, which is in fact bread. So let's go now and say step into. And once again, we're building up our costs array. So now the first element of that array is 4.5. And the next item is what? Well, it's whatever came after bread. So let's see what it is. And next item is oh, sorry, that was bread. Yeah, that was bread. Because the way we built this up here, first we had fruit. And then we say fruit dot next item is veggies. And veggies dot next item is bread. So now we're at our next item. And next item is bread. So we're in veggies now, and we're going to jump to bread next. See, there we are, bread. So let's go. So next item is null. So it means there is nothing next. So now we're going to say step into. Now here, you didn't see that part, but what happened is it jumped up to the while loop and it said, well, current item dot next item is not equal to null. Well, it was equal to null in this case. So now we're going to return the total cost. And I think we already dropped a watch on that, didn't we? I think we did. Oh yeah, there it is. So 7.5. So if you add up those numbers, hopefully they should come out to 7.5. So 3. Oh, actually, is something wrong with my program? Interesting. Yeah, 3 plus 4.5. So I don't think I did this completely correctly. Well, I think I'm going to assign it to you as homework to go through my code and fix it up because I messed over something here. But let's finish our program execution. So we'll say step into, and now we should go back up to the main method, and it's up there, and it should report out the cost of the groceries. And now the program's going to be over. It's just going to bail out and end. Now I went into my source code. I don't want to be there right now, so I'll say step return, and I'm back in my program, and I can say step over, and now my program is terminated. All right, so that's how a linked list works. I want you to go and play with it and take a look-see at it, and I want you to become familiar with it.
Have you figured out why we weren't traversing over the linked list properly?
Said while, see that? While current item dot next item not equals to null. So that means when the next item is equal to null, we will bail out of this loop, even though we haven't captured the cost of this item yet. It's only saying the next item is null, but we still need to process the cost of this item. So that's why we did not get an accurate counting of our total in this previous version of the code. Now let's look at the fix. Now actually, while loops are not while loops are not a good solution for dealing with linked lists. We actually want something called recursion, which we're going to talk about later on. Well, this is a recursive program, but we can make methods call each other recursively. So we need recursive, but for right now, the way I've solved it is good enough, which is that I did it this way to show you another simple statement, which is break. So here's if then. So we're saying if the next item is equal to null, and sorry, I think, but it should look like this. So it should look like this. So if next item equals, and single equal sign is for assignment, double equal sign is for comparison. So that's how we do a comparison. So we're saying if this object doesn't exist, if it's null, then we do break. That just means we bail out. We do not continue another iteration of the loop. So that's the use of if. Now, some people say, well, don't you need curly brackets? Or don't you need if then else or something? No. Because of the way Java works, if this condition is true, then this code will be executed. And if it's not true, it'll just jump down to the next thing right here. So anyway, write the code that I gave you before and test it and observe that it's not adding up the values of the items correctly. And then come back here and do this little fix. And then observe that it is going correctly. And if you do this, this will be the very best practice you can do for your test on Saturday. So anyway, as always, if you have any questions, give me a call. But I think that's an interesting example of Java data structures. And we're going to be doing a lot with linked lists because they're very, very useful. In fact, your next assignment will have you build up stacks and queues using linked lists, which is what the Java runtime environment, the Java standard library, actually does. All right, everybody, enjoy your Monday off. I hope I've given you something interesting to think about, and we'll see you in class.